What is wrong with the child? Why is she like this? This is serious.
Poor single dad took sick daughter to hospital. He was frozen when he discovered who the doctor is. 2:30 a.m. emergency room doors burst open. Edwin Patrick's boots pounded against linoleum. His 7-year-old daughter limp in his arms. Nance's skin burned like fire, 104 degrees. The little girl's breathing came in short gasps. Edwin's flannel shirt, still reeking of motor oil, clung to his chest as sweat mixed with panic. White curtain pulled back. A doctor looked up from her chart. Green eyes, that face. Edwin's knees nearly buckled. Dr. Elegance stood frozen, her stethoscope slipping from trembling fingers. 8 years. 8 years since she'd vanished from his life. Now here she was, staring at him, holding a child who had her exact same dimpled chin, her stubborn cowlick. Neither of them knew they were looking at their daughter. Before we go into details, please subscribe. It's free, and it makes my day 100% better. Like and comment where you're watching from. I would be glad to know this story goes as far as Canada, all of the United States of America, Australia, Africa, and even the United Kingdom. So let me know where you're watching from on comment section. I pray may the good God Almighty bless and preserve you all and your family. Amen. Let's begin. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead like angry wasps. Edwin's calloused hand shook as he laid Nancy on the examination table. The girl's dark hair stuck to her forehead, damp with fever. Elegance, Dr. Elegance now, moved with practiced precision, but Edwin caught the tremor in her voice when she spoke to the nurse. Get me a cooling blanket and Stardon 4. Normal saline, wide open. Her white coat was pristine, not a wrinkle out of place, professional, untouchable, nothing like the girl who used to steal his flannel shirts on cold mornings. Nance's eyes fluttered open, unfocused and glassy. Daddy. Her voice was barely a whisper. Edwin leaned down, brushing sweat-soaked hair from his daughter's face. I'm here, sweetheart. The doctor's going to take good care of you. Elegance's breath caught at the word daddy. She'd heard Edwin mention adoption proceedings years ago, back when they were together. But seeing him now, watching the fierce protective love in his eyes, something twisted in her chest. This wasn't the same Edwin who'd worked 2 jobs to pay for community college classes. This was a father. How long has she been running this fever? Elegance's voice was clinical, distant. She avoided Edwin's eyes, focusing intently on Nance's chart. Edwin rubbed his jaw, leaving a smudge of grease he'd missed washing off. Started around dinner time. I thought it was just a cold, but then she couldn't keep anything down. By midnight, she was burning up like this. Elegance pressed her stethoscope against Nance's chest, listening to the rapid heartbeat beneath fragile ribs. The little girl whimpered, turning her face toward Edwin's calloused hand. Sure, baby girl. I'm right here. The tenderness in his voice made Elegance's professional mask crack, just for a second. She'd imagined this moment 1,000 times, seeing Edwin again, but never like this. Never with a child between them, a child who looked so much like. No, she couldn't think about that. Not now. We need to bring her fever down immediately, Elegance said, her voice steadier now. I'm going to order blood work and a chest x-ray. It could be a viral infection, but I want to rule out pneumonia. Edwin nodded, his blue eyes red-rimmed from exhaustion and worry. Whatever she needs, document whatever it takes. Document. Not Elegance. Not the nickname he'd whispered in the dark all those years ago. Just Doc. The nurse returned with the cooling blanket, and together they wrapped Nance's small frame in the temperature-regulating fabric. The little girl's teeth chattered despite the fever, her body confused by the sudden change. Cold, Daddy. So cold. I know, baby. I know. But it's going to help you feel better. Elegance stepped back, creating distance between herself and the examination table. Between herself and Edwin. Between herself and the memories that threatened to swallow her whole. I'll be back to check on her in 15 minutes, she said, already turning toward the curtain. The nurse will stay with you. Wait. Edwin's voice stopped her mid-step. She didn't turn around. It's good to see you, Ellie. The nickname hung in the air like smoke. Elegance's hand tightened on the edge of the curtain. her knuckles white beneath the harsh fluorescent lights. "It's Dr. Elegance," she said quietly, "and I need to check on other patients." She disappeared through the curtain before he could say anything else, before the dam of emotion she'd built brick by brick over 8 years could finally break. In the hospital corridor, Elegance pressed her back against the cool wall, her breath coming in short bursts. Her hands trembled as she pulled out her phone, staring at the screensaver, a photograph of herself at graduation, alone, smiling a smile that never reached her eyes. 8 years. 8 years since her father, Dr. Richard Montgomery, had shipped her off to medical school in Boston the day after she told him she was pregnant. 8 years since he'd called her 3 months later with the news that had shattered her world. The baby didn't make it. Elegance. "I'm so sorry. Complications during delivery." There was nothing they could do. She'd been in the middle of anatomy class when he'd called. She'd walked out, gotten on a bus, and disappeared into grief so profound she'd thought she'd never surface. When she'd finally returned to finish her degree, Edwin was gone. No forwarding address. No phone number. Just gone, like their love had never existed. And now here he was, holding a little girl who couldn't be more than 7 years old. A little girl with Elegance's dimpled chin. Her cowlick. Her green eyes. "No. It's impossible. My baby died. My father told me she died." But doubt, small and insistent, had already taken root. Dr. Elegance. She looked up to find Nurse Maria Rodriguez standing before her, concern etched across her round face. Maria had worked the night shift in this ER for 20 years. She'd seen everything, heard everything, and kept everyone's secrets. "You okay, honey? You look like you've seen a ghost." Elegance straightened, smoothing down her white coat with shaking hands. "I'm fine, Maria. It's been a long shift." Maria's dark eyes were knowing, too knowing. "That man in exam room 3. You know him." "We knew each other a long time ago." "And the little girl?" Elegance met Maria's gaze, seeing her own questions reflected there. "What about her?" "She looks just like you, honey. Same eyes. Same chin. Same stubborn little cowlick that won't stay down." The words Elegance had been trying to suppress came tumbling out. "My father told me my baby died 8 years ago. He said there were complications. He said." Maria's hand found Elegance's shoulder, steady and warm. "What exactly did he say?" "That she was stillborn. That there was nothing they could do." "Did you see the body?" Elegance's breath caught. "No. I was sedated. When I woke up, they told me she was already gone. They said it would be too traumatic for me to see her." Maria's expression hardened. "Your father arranged everything?" "Yes. He was chief of surgery at Boston General at the time. He said he'd take care of all the details so I could focus on recovering." "And you never questioned it?" "I was 19 years old, Maria. I'd just lost my baby and the man I loved had disappeared. I was barely functioning. My father was all I had left." Maria squeezed her shoulder. "You need to look at that little girl's medical records. Her birth certificate. Her adoption papers if the father has them." "I can't just access a patient's." "That might be your daughter in there, Elegance. Your daughter who you were told was dead. If there's even a chance that your father lied to you." The implication hung heavy between them. Dr. Richard Montgomery was a lot of things. Brilliant surgeon, ruthless administrator, controlling father. But could he really have faked his own grandchild's death? Could he have stolen Elegance's baby and somehow arranged for Edwin to find her? "Edwin said he adopted her," Elegance whispered. "He said the adoption was years ago." "How many years?" "He didn't say exactly." "Then find out." Maria's voice was firm. "And while you're at it, find out where he adopted her from. When? Under what circumstances?" Elegance's mind was racing. "If I access those records without proper authorization?" "Then don't get caught." Maria glanced down the corridor, then back at Elegance. "Look, I know what your father did to you 8 years ago. How he controlled every aspect of your life. How he sent you away the moment you told him you were pregnant. Do you really think it's beyond him to fake a death certificate? The truth was, Elegance didn't know. Her father had always been obsessed with the family name, the family reputation. A teenage pregnancy with a mechanic son would have been his worst nightmare. But to fake a baby's death? To steal his own grandchild? I need to examine her again, Elegance said suddenly. I need to see. I need to be sure. Maria nodded. I'll come with you. And honey, if that little girl is yours, we are going to find out the truth. Whatever it takes. Back in exam room 3, Edwin sat in a plastic chair beside Nance's bed, holding her small hand in his large, oil-stained one. The cooling blanket had brought her temperature down to 102 degrees, but she was still flushed and restless. Tell me the story again, Daddy, Nancy mumbled, her eyes half closed. The one about the princess. Edwin smiled, a tired, tender smile that transformed his rough features. Which princess, sweetheart? The one you found. The one who was lost. Edwin's smile faltered, just for a moment. It was Nance's favorite story, the one he told her about how he'd found her, wrapped in a pink blanket, outside St. Mary's Church on a cold February morning 8 years ago. He'd been walking to his night shift at the garage when he'd heard the crying. At first, he'd thought it was a kitten, but when he'd followed the sound to the church steps, he'd found a basket with a tiny baby inside, maybe a few hours old, her face red from crying and cold. There'd been no note, nor explanation. Just a baby who shouldn't have survived the night but had, because Edwin Patrick had been walking by at exactly the right moment. Once upon a time, Edwin began, his voice soft, there was a little princess who got lost. She was so tiny, she could fit in a basket, and she cried and cried because she was scared and alone. But then you found me, Nancy whispered. But then I found you. And I picked you up, and you stopped crying. You looked right at me with these big green eyes, and I knew you were supposed to be mine. And you took me home. I took you to the hospital first, to make sure you were okay. Then I took you home, and I've been taking care of you ever since. Nance's eyes drifted closed, a small smile on her fever-flushed face. Best daddy ever. Edwin's throat tightened. Best daughter ever. The curtain moved, and Elegance stepped back into the room, Maria close behind. Edwin looked up, and for a moment, their eyes met, really met, for the first time since that terrible morning 8 years ago when Elegance's father had shown up at Edwin's apartment and told him that Elegance was gone, that she never wanted to see him again, that he needed to move on with his life. Edwin had tried to call, had tried to find her, but Dr. Montgomery had made sure that every door was closed, every path blocked. Eventually, Edwin had given up. And then, 3 months later, he'd found Nancy on those church steps, and his broken heart had found a new purpose. Her temperature's coming down, Elegance said, checking the monitor. That's good. But I want to keep her overnight for observation. Edwin nodded. Whatever you think is best. Elegance pulled out a small flashlight, checking Nance's pupils. The little girl stirred, mumbling in her sleep. She's beautiful, Elegance said softly, almost to herself. She's my whole world. There was something in Edwin's voice, fierce pride mixed with old grief, that made Elegance's chest ache. She'd spent 8 years wondering what her daughter would have looked like, what she would have sounded like, whether she would have had Edwin's stubbornness or Elegance's quick temper. Now, looking at Nance's sleeping face, Elegance felt certainty settling in her bones like frost. This is my daughter. I know it is. Edwin, she said carefully, can I ask you something? He looked wary. Sure. Nancy, how old is she exactly? 7. Well, 7.5. Her birthday's in February. February. The same month Elegance's baby had supposedly died. And you said you adopted her. Edwin's jaw tightened. Yeah. Why? I need to know the details. For her medical records. It wasn't entirely a lie. Birth history was relevant to treatment. But Edwin's expression suggested he knew there was more to the question. I found her outside St. Mary's Church, Edwin said slowly. She was maybe a few hours old. Someone had just left her there, in a basket. In February. Elegance's hands clenched at her sides. You found her? She was abandoned. Yeah. The police investigated, but they never found the mother. After 6 months, I was able to file for adoption. It wasn't easy, single guy, barely making ends meet, but Judge Morrison knew my family. She approved it. Do you have the birth certificate? The adoption papers? Now Edwin was definitely suspicious. Why do you need to see those? Elegance glanced at Maria, who gave her an encouraging nod. Because, Elegance said, her voice barely above a whisper, I think Nancy might be my daughter. The words fell like stones into water, ripples spreading outward. Edwin stared at her, his face cycling through confusion, disbelief, and finally, anger. What the hell are you talking about? 8 years ago, I was pregnant. 8 years ago, my father told me my baby died during delivery. But I never saw her. I never held her. He arranged everything, took care of all the details. Elegance. 8 years ago, in February, you found a baby girl outside a church. A baby who was just hours old. A baby with no explanation, no note, no mother. Edwin stood up, his chair scraping loudly against the floor. You think your father... Jesus Christ. Ellie. You think your father faked your baby's death and then just dumped her outside a church? I think he knew you'd find her, Elegance said, her voice cracking. St. Mary's is 2 blocks from your old apartment. You walked past it every day on your way to work. He knew you'd be the one to find her. That's insane. Is it? Elegance stepped closer, her green eyes blazing. My father hated you, Edwin. He thought you were beneath me, that you'd ruin my life. When I told him I was pregnant, he shipped me off to Boston the next day. And 3 months later, he called to tell me the baby was dead. But why would he go through all that? Why not just, I don't know, force you to give the baby up for adoption through proper channels? Because is Dr. Richard Montgomery, Maria interjected quietly. Because is a control freak who thinks is God. And because this way, he got to control the narrative. Elegance believed her baby was dead, so she wouldn't go looking. And Edwin, you got a baby to care for, which kept you from going after Elegance. Edwin sank back into his chair, his face pale. You're saying he played us. Both of us. I'm saying it's possible, Elegance said. And I need to know for sure. Please, Edwin, let me see Nance's adoption papers. Let me run a DNA test. A DNA test? Just to be certain. If I'm wrong, then I'm wrong, and I'll leave you alone. But if I'm right... If she was right, then everything she'd believed for 8 years was a lie. If she was right, then her daughter hadn't died. Her daughter had been alive all along, growing up without her, loved by another man, living a life Elegance should have been part of. Edwin looked down at Nance's sleeping face, then back at Elegance. If you're right, he said slowly, then my daughter, the little girl I've raised for 7 years, is really your daughter. Our daughter. Yes. And your father is a monster who stole a baby and let everyone believe she was dead. Yes. Edwin was quiet for a long moment, his hand still holding Nance's. Finally, he spoke, his voice rough with emotion. The papers are at home. In a safe. I'll bring them tomorrow morning. Thank you. But Ellie, if this is true, if Nancy really is our daughter, then we are going to destroy your father. Together. Elegance met his gaze, seeing the same fierce determination she'd fallen in love with all those years ago. Together, she agreed. The rest of the night passed in a blur of blood tests, x-rays, and careful monitoring. Nance's fever continued to drop, and by 6 a.m., she was sleeping peacefully, her small chest rising and falling in steady rhythm. Edwin dozed in the chair beside her bed, his head tilted back against the wall, exhaustion finally catching up to him. Elegance stood in the doorway, watching them both, memorizing every detail. Nancy. The name suited her. Larry Nancy, Edwin had called her on the intake form. Elegance wondered about the story behind it, about all the small moments and inside jokes she'd missed. 7 years of bedtime stories. 7 years of scraped knees and lost teeth and birthday cakes. 7 years of love and laughter and life. 7 years stolen from her. You should go home. Get some rest. Elegance turned to find Maria standing behind her, 2 cups of coffee in hand. She accepted one gratefully, wrapping her cold fingers around the warm styrofoam. I can't, Elegance said. Not until I know for sure. You already know. You know it in your bones. It was true. The moment Elegance had seen Nance's face, something had clicked into place. A puzzle piece she hadn't known was missing. My father is going to fight this, Elegance said quietly. If it comes out that he faked a death certificate, arranged an illegal abandonment, he could lose his medical license. Go to jail. Good, Maria said bluntly. He deserves it. He's still my father. He's a criminal who stole your baby. Elegance closed her eyes, the weight of it all pressing down on her shoulders. I don't know if I'm strong enough to go through this. The investigation, the scandal, the media attention. It's going to destroy our family. Your family was destroyed 8 years ago when your father lied to you, Maria said gently. This is about building it back, about getting back what was stolen. What if Edwin doesn't want to share custody? What if he fights me for her? Then you figure it out. But first, you need to know the truth. Everything else comes after. Maria was right. The truth first. Everything else could wait. Edwin woke at 7 a.m. to find Nancy awake and asking for pancakes. Her fever was completely gone, replaced by the boundless energy of a 7-year-old who'd been cooped up too long. Can we go home, Daddy? I want to see Mr. Whiskers. Mr. Whiskers was their ancient tabby cat, a grumpy old Tom who tolerated Nance's affection with resigned patience. Soon, baby girl. The doctor wants to make sure you're really better first. But I am better. See. Nancy scrambled out of bed, doing a little dance to prove her point. All better. Edwin laughed, catching her before she could trip over the 4 lines still attached to her arm. Hold on there, jumping bean. Let's wait for the doctor, okay? As if on cue, Elegance appeared, a fresh cup of coffee in hand and exhaustion evident in every line of her body. She'd been on shift for over 12 hours, but she'd refused to leave, refused to let another doctor take over Nance's case. Good morning, she said, her professional mask firmly in place. How are you feeling, Nancy? I'm hungry, Nancy announced. And I want to go home. Well, let's check you over first, and then we'll see about breakfast. Elegance conducted a thorough examination, listening to Nance's lungs, checking her throat, testing her reflexes. Nancy chatted the entire time, telling Elegance about Mr. Whiskers and her favorite TV show and the treehouse Edwin was building in their backyard. Your daddy sounds like he takes good care of you, Elegance said softly. The best daddy ever, Nancy said firmly. He makes me pancakes on Saturdays and reads me stories every night and is teaching me how to fix cars. Edwin smiled, ruffling Nance's hair. She's a natural mechanic. Gets it from me. Or from me, Elegance thought. Her own father had been furious when she'd shown more interest in taking apart radios than playing with dolls. All right, Nancy, Elegance said, stepping back. You're looking much better. I think we can discharge you this morning, but I want your daddy to bring you back if the fever returns, okay? Okay. Edwin stood, stretching his stiff back. I'll go grab those papers you wanted to see. I can be back in an hour. Elegance nodded, her heart pounding. In 1 hour, she'd know for certain. In 1 hour, her entire world might change. Dr. Montgomery's downfall. Maria, who has been quietly collecting evidence throughout the entire ordeal, reveals that she recorded Dr. Montgomery's confession. She also has copies of the falsified death certificate, bank records showing payments to the nurse who helped him, and testimony from hospital staff who witnessed his threats against Elegance. Faced with overwhelming evidence and the prospect of criminal prosecution, Dr. Montgomery resigns his position and agrees not to contest Edwin's custody or Elegance's parental rights. However, his downfall is swift and public. The story breaks in the local news, and Dr. Richard Montgomery, once one of the most respected surgeons in the state, becomes a cautionary tale about power, control, and the destruction of family bonds. Edwin arrived back at the hospital at 8:30 a.m., a manila folder clutched in his oil-stained hands. He'd gone home, showered, changed into clean jeans and a flannel shirt, but exhaustion still shadowed his eyes. Nancy was coloring in a hospital activity book, humming tunelessly while Maria kept her company. Elegance stood at the nurse's station, pretending to review charts but really just waiting, her heart pounding against her ribs like a trapped bird. "Ellie," Edwin said quietly, "can we talk? Somewhere private." She nodded, leading him to a small consultation room down the hall. The walls were beige, the furniture standard issue hospital, a desk, 2 chairs, a box of tissues that had seen better days. Not exactly the setting for life-changing revelations, but it would have to do. Edwin set the folder on the desk, then sank into one of the chairs, his head in his hands. "I didn't sleep. I went home, and I looked through all of Nance's papers, and I kept thinking, what if you're right? What if she's yours? Ours?" Elegance sat across from him, her hands folded tightly in her lap. "Did you find anything?" "See for yourself." She opened the folder with trembling fingers. Inside were copies of the police report from the night Nancy was found, the social services assessment, the foster care documents, and finally, the adoption decree signed by Judge Claire Morrison. But what caught Elegance's attention was the hospital record from Nance's initial examination as a newborn. The attending physician had noted that the baby showed signs of recent medical care. The umbilical cord had been properly clamped and cut. The baby had been cleaned and appeared healthy, well-nourished, and showing no signs of exposure despite supposedly being left outside in February. In other words, this was not a baby who had been truly abandoned by a desperate mother. This was a baby who had been deliberately placed by someone with medical knowledge and access to proper care. The police never found the mother, Edwin said. They searched for months, put out appeals, checked every hospital within 100 miles. Nothing. It was like she just vanished. "Because there was no mother to find," Elegance said, her voice hollow. "My father made sure of that." She pulled out the next document, Nance's original birth certificate, issued by the state. It listed the mother as unknown and the father as unknown. The birth date, February 13th. Elegance's hand shook as she reached for her phone, scrolling through her medical records app until she found what she was looking for. Her own hospital records from Boston General, documenting her labor and delivery on February 13th, 8 years ago. Baby girl. Born at 11:47 p.m. weight, 6 pounds, 8 ounces. Status, deceased. Except she hadn't been deceased at all. Nancy was found at 3 a.m. on February 14th, Elegance said. 3 hours after I gave birth. 3 hours after my father told me my baby had died. Edwin's jaw clenched. He drove her here himself. He must have. Boston to here is about 3 hours. He delivered her, told you she was dead, and then drove straight here and left her where he knew I'd find her. But how did he know you'd be there? How did he know you'd be walking past St. Mary's at exactly 3 a.m.? Edwin's expression turned grim. Because I told him. The day he came to my apartment and told me you never wanted to see me again. I was so angry. I said I was going to work the night shift at Murphy's garage. I said I'd walk there if I had to because my truck had broken down. And Murphy's garage is 2 blocks past St. Mary's Church, on the same route I walked every night. They stared at each other across the desk, the full scope of Dr. Montgomery's manipulation finally clear. He'd separated them, convinced Edwin that Elegance wanted nothing to do with him, shipped Elegance off to Boston before she could fight back. And then, when the baby was born, he'd staged an elaborate deception to ensure that both of them got exactly what he thought they deserved. Elegance got her medical career without the burden of a teenage pregnancy, and Edwin got a child to love without ever knowing she was his own daughter. I need to run a DNA test, Elegance said, to be absolutely certain. I already had one done. Elegance's head snapped up. What? Edwin reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. I went to one of those 24-hour DNA testing places on my way back here. Used a hair from Nance's brush and a sample from myself. Results came back while I was driving. He unfolded the paper and slid it across the desk. Probability of paternity, 99.98%. She's mine, Edwin said, his voice cracking. Biologically, I mean. Which means. She's mine too, Elegance finished. She's ours. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The weight of 8 years of lies pressed down on them, suffocating in its enormity. Finally, Edwin spoke, his voice rough. What do we do now? We tell Nancy the truth. She's 7 years old, Ellie. How do you explain to a 7-year-old that her dead mother isn't actually dead? That her grandfather stole her and lied about it for 7 years? That her entire life is built on a foundation of lies? Elegance had no good answer for that. She was a doctor, trained to heal physical wounds. But this? This was a wound that went soul deep. We figure it out, she said finally. Together. Like we should have done 8 years ago. Edwin reached across the desk, his calloused hand covering hers. I never stopped loving you, Ellie. Not once. Even when I thought you'd chosen your father over me. Even when I thought I'd never see you again. I never stopped. Tears blurred Elegance's vision. I never stopped either. And now we have a daughter. We have Nancy. What about your father? He's not going to just accept this. He's going to fight. Then we fight back. But first, I need to see Nancy. I need to. I just need to see her. They stood together, Edwin's hand still holding hers, and walked back toward the hospital room where their daughter waited, oblivious to the storm brewing around her. Nancy was standing on the hospital bed, arms spread wide, pretending to be an airplane. Maria was laughing, encouraging the performance, when Elegance and Edwin appeared in the doorway. Daddy, look, I'm flying. Edwin's face softened, all the anger and confusion melting away in the face of his daughter's joy. I see that, jumping Bean. But maybe we should fly closer to the ground, yeah? Before Nurse Maria has a heart attack. Nancy giggled, hopping down into Edwin's waiting arms. He caught her easily, swinging her around once before setting her on her feet. Nancy, Edwin said, kneeling down to her eye level. Dr. Elegance and I need to talk to you about something important. Can you sit down for a minute? Nancy's smile faltered. Am I in trouble? No, baby girl. You're not in trouble. But we need to tell you something, and it might be confusing. So I need you to listen carefully, okay? Nancy climbed back onto the bed, her small hands folded in her lap, green eyes wide and serious. Elegance sat on one side of her, Edwin on the other, and Maria quietly. Moved to stand by the door, ready to give them privacy but also ready to intervene if needed. Edwin looked at Elegance, and she nodded. They'd agreed on the way back. They would tell Nancy the truth, but gently, in terms a 7-year-old could understand. Nancy, Elegance began, her voice soft. You know how your daddy found you when you were a tiny baby? Nancy nodded. Outside the church. I was crying, and Daddy heard me. That's right. Well, we've discovered something really important. When you were born, your mommy and daddy, your real mommy and daddy, they didn't know what happened to you. Nancy's brow furrowed. I don't understand. Edwin took her small hand in his. What Dr. Elegance is trying to say is, well, sweetheart, she's your real mommy. And I'm your real daddy. We didn't know it until now, but you're our daughter. Both of ours. Nancy looked from Edwin to Elegance and back again, confusion written all over her face. But, you're already my daddy. I am, Edwin said firmly. I always will be. But now we know that I'm your daddy in 2 ways, because I found you and raised you, and because you came from me. From us. Nancy turned to Elegance, studying her face with the intense scrutiny only children possess. You're my mommy. Elegance's throat tightened. Yes, sweetheart. I am. But where were you? Why weren't you with me and Daddy? How to explain betrayal and manipulation to a 7-year-old. How to convey the depth of what had been stolen from all of them. Sometimes grown-ups make mistakes, Elegance said carefully. Sometimes they do things they think are right, but they're actually very wrong. When you were born, someone made a very big mistake. They told me you had. They told me you weren't alive anymore. So I didn't know I should be looking for you. Who told you that? Elegance hesitated. My father. Your grandfather. Nance's eyes widened. The mean doctor. Both Elegance and Edwin froze. The mean doctor. Edwin repeated. Nancy nodded vigorously. The one who came to our house that time. He was really tall and he had white hair and he yelled at you, Daddy. He said I shouldn't be there. He said I was a mistake. Edwin's face went pale. When did this happen, Nancy? When did you see this man? A long time ago. I was really little. Maybe 4. I was supposed to be sleeping, but I heard yelling, so I came downstairs. Edwin looked at Elegance, his expression grim. Your father came to my house 3 years ago. I thought Nancy was asleep upstairs. He tracked me down somehow, found out about the adoption. He wanted to see her. Why didn't you tell me this before? Because you were gone, Ellie. Because I thought you'd never come back. And because he threatened me, said if I ever told anyone about his visit, he'd find a way to take Nancy away from me. Elegance's hands clenched into fists. He knew. 3 years ago, my father knew exactly where Nancy was. He knew she was alive, and he never told me. What did he want? Maria asked from the doorway. Edwin's jaw tightened. He wanted to see her. Said he needed to know she was being properly cared for. I told him to get the hell off my property, and he left. But before he went, he said Nancy was better off not knowing where she came from. That some secrets were better left buried. I don't like him, Nancy said firmly. He has mean eyes. Despite everything, Elegance almost smiled. Her daughter had good instincts. Nancy, Elegance said, I know this is a lot to take in, and you don't have to make any decisions right now about what this means or what you want to call me or anything like that. But I want you to know that I love you. I've always loved you, even when I didn't know where you were. And now that I've found you, I'm never going to let anyone take you away again. Nancy was quiet for a moment, processing. Then she turned to Edwin. Daddy, is Dr. Elegance going to live with us now? Edwin blinked, caught off guard by the question. We haven't talked about that yet, jumping Bain. But if she's my mommy, shouldn't she live with us? That's what families do, right? They live together. Out of the mouths of babes. Edwin looked at Elegance, and she saw the question in his eyes, the hope, the fear, the uncertainty. They'd spent 8 years apart. 8 years of hurt and misunderstanding. Could they really just pick up where they'd left off? How about we take things one step at a time? Elegance suggested gently. First, we need to make sure you're completely better. Then we need to talk to some lawyers and judges to make everything official. And then we'll figure out what our family looks like. Together. All 3 of us. Nancy seemed satisfied with that answer. Okay. But can you come have dinner at our house sometimes? Daddy makes really good spaghetti. Elegance smiled, tears sliding down her cheeks. I would love that, sweetheart. I would absolutely love that. Nancy yawned, the emotional conversation taking its toll. Edwin scooped her up, settling her against his chest. Why don't you rest for a little bit, jumping Bain? We'll be right here. Promise. Promise. Within minutes, Nancy was asleep, her small hand curled in Edwin's shirt. Maria quietly left the room, giving them privacy, and Elegance and Edwin sat in silence, watching their daughter sleep. What now? Edwin finally asked. Now we go to war, Elegance said quietly. Because my father isn't going to accept this. He's going to fight to keep the truth buried, and we need to be ready. How do we fight a man with his kind of power? We expose him. We go to the medical board, the police, the press if we have to. We make sure everyone knows exactly what Dr. Richard Montgomery did. Edwin shook his head. He'll destroy you, Ellie. He'll use every connection he has to discredit you, to make it look like you're unstable or vindictive or... I don't care, Elegance said fiercely. He stole our daughter. He stole 8 years from us. I'm not going to let him get away with that just because I'm afraid of what it might cost me. What about Nancy? When this all comes out, when it becomes public, she's going to be at the center of it. Are we really willing to put her through that? It was a fair question, a necessary question, because once they opened this door, there would be no closing it. Nance's life would be dissected by lawyers and journalists and strangers on the internet. She would know, in excruciating detail, exactly how and why she'd been stolen from her parents. I think, Elegance said slowly, that Nancy deserves the truth. Not the sanitized version, not the story designed to protect her from harsh realities. The actual truth. And yes, it's going to hurt. Yes, it's going to be confusing and scary. But the alternative, letting my father's lie stand, letting him walk away from what he did, that's worse. Edwin was quiet, his hand stroking Nance's hair. Finally, he nodded. Okay. We do it. We expose him. But we do it together, and we do it right. We gather every piece of evidence, every document, every witness. We build a case so airtight that even your father's army of lawyers can't poke holes in it. Maria has recordings, Elegance said. She recorded my father when he came to the hospital 3 years ago to check on Nancy. She's been documenting everything, just in case. Edwin raised an eyebrow. That woman is terrifying. She's the best nurse I've ever worked with, and she's been suspicious of my father for years. Then we talk to Maria. We talk to lawyers. And we prepare for the fight of our lives. Elegance reached across Nance's sleeping form and took Edwin's hand. I am sorry. For all of this. For my father. For the years we lost. For... Stop, Edwin said gently. None of this is your fault, Ellie. Your father made his choices. We are making ours. And our choice is to fight for our family. Our family. The word settled into Elegance's chest, warm and solid and real. For the first time in 8 years, she felt like she had something worth fighting for. Dr. Richard Montgomery received the call at 10:30 a.m., just as he was finishing his morning rounds at Boston General. Dr. Montgomery, this is Nurse Rodriguez from County General. I'm calling to inform you that your daughter, Dr. Elegance, has accessed confidential patient files and conducted unauthorized medical tests. We've initiated a formal investigation. Richard's expression didn't change. He'd been expecting this call. Thank you for informing me, Nurse Rodriguez. I'll be down there this afternoon to address the situation personally. He ended the call and stood at the window of his office, looking out over the Boston skyline. He'd built an empire in this city, a reputation, a legacy, a dynasty of medical excellence that bore the Montgomery name. He'd worked too hard, sacrificed too much, to let it all crumble now because of a sentimental mistake from 8 years ago. Elegance had always been too soft, too emotional. She'd inherited her mother's weakness, that tendency to let feelings override logic. When she'd come to him at 19, pregnant and terrified, babbling about love and keeping the baby and building a life with that mechanic, Richard had known immediately what had to be done. The boy, Edwin Patrick, was nothing. No education, no prospects, no family money or connections. He would have dragged Elegance down, turned her into another cautionary tale of wasted potential. So Richard had done what needed to be done. He'd sent Elegance to Boston, arranged for the delivery at his hospital where he controlled every variable, and then, then he'd solved the problem. The baby had been healthy, perfect, even. For a moment, holding his infant granddaughter, Richard had almost reconsidered. But then he'd thought about everything he'd planned for Elegance, medical school, residency, a partnership in his practice, and he'd known the child couldn't be part of that future. So he'd done what he always did. He'd controlled the situation. He'd paid a nurse to help him smuggle the baby out. He'd falsified the death certificate himself, using his position as chief of surgery to ensure no one questioned it. And then he'd driven 3 hours to County General, where he knew Edwin Patrick worked, and he'd left the baby where the boy would find her. It was elegant, really. Poetic, even. Edwin got to play hero, raising a child he believed was abandoned. Elegance got her medical career without the burden of single motherhood. And Richard ensured that the Montgomery legacy remained untarnished. Everyone won. Except now Elegance had figured it out. Now she was asking questions, running tests, threatening to expose him. Richard picked up his phone and dialed his lawyer. Charles, it's Richard Montgomery. I need you to file an emergency motion. My daughter has become unstable, accessing patient records without authorization, making wild accusations about events from 8 years ago. I believe she may be a danger to herself and her patients. I need her medical license suspended immediately pending psychiatric evaluation. If Elegance wanted to fight, Richard would show her exactly what happened to people who challenged him. He'd protected her once by taking her child away. Now he'd protect his legacy by taking her career. By noon, the hospital board had called an emergency meeting. Elegance sat in a conference room with Edwin and Maria, facing 5 board members who looked grave and uncomfortable. Dr. Harrison Chen, the board chairman, cleared his throat. Dr. Elegance, you've been accused of accessing patient files without authorization and conducting medical tests without proper consent. Can you explain your actions? Elegance had known this was coming. She'd prepared for it. Yes, sir. The patient in question, Larry Nancy Patrick, presented with a high fever and symptoms of severe infection. During the course of her treatment, I noticed certain physical characteristics that suggested a biological relationship to myself. Given that I was told 8 years ago that my own daughter had died during childbirth, I felt it was medically necessary to verify my suspicions. Dr. Chen frowned. You conducted a DNA test. I reviewed existing blood work that had already been ordered as part of Nance's treatment. I did not conduct any additional tests without authorization. It was technically true. The DNA comparison had been done using samples that were already in the system. And the patient's files? Another board member asked. You accessed her birth records, her adoption records. All of which are medically relevant to her treatment, Elegance interjected. Understanding a patient's full medical history, including circumstances of birth and adoption, can be crucial to proper diagnosis and care. The board members exchanged glances. They clearly weren't buying it. Dr. Elegance, Dr. Chen said carefully, we've received a complaint from Dr. Richard Montgomery, your father, suggesting that you may be experiencing some kind of psychological crisis. He's requesting that you undergo a fitness for duty evaluation. Elegance's jaw tightened. Of course her father would play that card. If he could paint her as unstable, emotionally compromised, no one would believe her accusations. With all due respect, Edwin spoke up from beside her, Dr. Elegance's actions were entirely appropriate given the circumstances. My daughter Nancy is her biological child. Dr. Montgomery, Richard Montgomery, stole that baby from the hospital 8 years ago, faked a death certificate, and abandoned the infant where I would find her. If anyone's fitness for duty should be questioned, it's his. The room went silent. Dr. Chen leaned forward. Mr. Patrick, that's a very serious accusation. I have proof, Edwin said, pulling out the folder. Birth records showing Nancy was born at Boston General on February 13th, the same night Dr. Elegance gave birth. Police records showing Nancy was found abandoned 3 hours later, 3 hours away from Boston, exactly enough time for someone to drive from one hospital to the other. DNA test results confirming that Nancy is both mine and Dr. Elegance's biological daughter. He spread the documents across the conference table. Dr. Richard Montgomery committed fraud. He falsified a death certificate. He stole a newborn baby from the hospital and abandoned her in a different state. And then he spent the next 8 years covering it up, including making threats against me when he discovered where Nancy was living. Maria stepped forward, pulling out a phone. And I have recordings of Dr. Montgomery's visit to County General 3 years ago, of him asking about the little girl who'd been adopted by Edwin Patrick, of him saying, and I quote, "Some secrets are better left buried." She pressed play, and Richard Montgomery's voice filled the conference room, cold and authoritative and utterly damning. The child is better off not knowing where she came from. Elegance is better off believing the child is dead. And you, Mr. Patrick, are better off not asking questions about how conveniently you happened to find a baby outside a church at the exact moment you were walking to work. Some secrets are better left buried. The board members looked stunned. Dr. Chen ran a hand over his face. This changes everything. If what you're saying is true. It is true, Elegance said firmly. And I have 8 years of medical records, phone records, and witness testimony to prove it. My father committed crimes that should result in the loss of his medical license and criminal prosecution. And instead of answering for what he did, He's trying to destroy my career and credibility. We'll need to investigate. Then investigate, Elegance said. But in the meantime, I want it on record that I stand by every action I took. I found my daughter, the daughter who was stolen from me, and I'm not going to apologize for that. The meeting ended with the board promising a full investigation and agreeing to table any discussion of suspending Elegance's license until all the facts were gathered. It wasn't a victory, but it wasn't a defeat either. As they left the conference room, Maria pulled Elegance aside. Your father is going to come after you hard now. He knows the board is taking this seriously. Let him come, Elegance said. I'm done being afraid of him. But as they walked back toward Nance's room, Elegance couldn't shake the feeling that the worst was yet to come. Her father didn't lose. He didn't back down. And he definitely didn't accept defeat, which meant he was planning something. Something that would hurt. Medical climax, Nance's crisis. That night, just as Edwin was preparing to take Nancy home, disaster struck. Nancy had been laughing, talking about what she wanted for dinner, when suddenly her expression went blank. Her eyes rolled back, and she collapsed, her small body seizing violently. Nancy! Edwin lunged for her, but Elegance was already there, catching Nancy before she hit the floor. Get a crash cart. Now! Elegance shouted, lowering Nancy to the ground and turning her on her side to protect her airway. The seizure lasted 45 seconds, an eternity. When it finally stopped, Nancy lay limp and unresponsive, her breathing shallow. Maria appeared with the crash cart and a team of nurses. They moved Nancy back to the bed, starting oxygen, getting new 4 access, drawing blood for emergency labs. What's happening? Edwin's voice was strangled with terror. She was fine. She was completely fine. Elegance was already examining Nancy, checking pupils, testing reflexes. It's bacterial meningitis, a complication from her initial infection. The antibiotics we gave her weren't strong enough, and the bacteria spread to her central nervous system. Can you fix it? We need to reduce the pressure on her brain immediately, or we risk permanent damage. She needs surgery, a craniotomy to relieve the pressure and drain any fluid buildup. Then do it, Edwin said desperately. Do whatever you have to do. I can't, Elegance said, her voice breaking. I am suspended. I'm not allowed to perform surgery without board approval. Then get approval. There isn't time. She needs surgery in the next 30 minutes, or... She couldn't finish the sentence. Couldn't voice the terrifying reality that Nancy might not survive. Maria was already on the phone with the surgical team. She hung up and turned to Elegance, her face grim. The on-call neurosurgeon is stuck in surgery. Won't be available for at least 2 hours. 2 hours is too long. I know. Elegance looked down at Nance's pale face, at the little girl who was finally, miraculously hers, and who she might lose before she'd even had a chance to be her mother. No. She'd lost Nancy once. She wasn't losing her again. Prep an OR, Elegance said, her voice steady now, filled with determination. I'm doing the surgery. Ellie, you can't, Edwin said. They suspended you. If you operate now, you could lose your license permanently. You could face criminal charges. I don't care. Elegance met his eyes, and he saw the fierce love there, the absolute refusal to back down. She's our daughter, Edwin. I'm not letting her die because of politics or my father's vendetta. I'm saving her, and damn the consequences. Maria didn't hesitate. OR2 is available. I'll get the team together. As they rushed Nancy toward the operating room, Edwin grabbed Elegance's arm. Thank you, he said, his voice rough. Whatever happens after this, thank you. Elegance squeezed his hand once, then disappeared through the surgical doors. The surgery took 3 hours. Edwin paced the waiting room, unable to sit, unable to think about anything except Nance's small body on that operating table and Elegance's hands working to save her. Maria sat with him, bringing coffee he didn't drink and updates he barely heard. And then, at 11:47 p.m., exactly 8 years after Nancy had been born, Elegance emerged from the OR, still in her surgical scrubs, her mask pulled down around her neck. Edwin surged to his feet. Is she? She's stable, Elegance said, exhaustion evident in every line of her body. The surgery went well. We drained the fluid, relieved the pressure. She's going to need intensive antibiotics for the next few weeks, but she's going to be okay. Edwin's knees buckled with relief. Maria caught him, guiding him back to a chair. Can I see her? She's in recovery. Give them another 20 minutes to get her settled, and then you can sit with her. Edwin nodded, unable to speak past the lump in his throat. Elegance sank into the chair beside him, and for a long moment, they just sat there in silence, the weight of the night pressing down on them. You saved her, Edwin finally said. You saved our daughter. We saved her, Elegance corrected. You got her here in time. You never gave up on her. What happens now? With the board, with your license? Elegance shrugged, too tired to care. I don't know. Probably nothing good. But Nance is alive, and that's all that matters. The waiting room doors burst open, and Dr. Richard Montgomery strode in, his face thunderous. What the hell do you think you're doing? He demanded, advancing on Elegance. You were explicitly told not to perform surgery. You violated a direct order from the hospital board. Elegance stood, facing her father with a calm she didn't feel. I saved my daughter's life. That's what I was doing. Your daughter. Richard's laugh was cold. You mean the child you abandoned 8 years ago? The child I had to clean up after because you were too irresponsible to handle the consequences of your actions. You stole her. Elegance's voice rose, years of suppressed anger finally breaking free. You told me she was dead. You faked a death certificate. You bribed hospital staff. You committed fraud and kidnapping. And you have the audacity to stand here and act like you were doing me a favor. I was protecting you, Richard said icily. From ruining your life with that, he jerked his chin toward Edwin, that nobody mechanic and his trailer park genetics. Edwin stood, his hands clenched into fists. Watch your mouth. Or what? You'll hit me. Go ahead. Assault and battery will look great on your custody hearing. There won't be a custody hearing, Maria interjected, stepping between them, because Mr. Patrick is Nance's legal adoptive father and has been for 7 years, and Dr. Elegance is her biological mother, which the DNA tests confirm, which means you, Dr. Montgomery, have no legal standing whatsoever. Richard turned his cold gaze on Maria. You've been recording me. Without my consent. That's illegal in this state. Actually, a new voice said from the doorway, it's not. Everyone turned to see a woman in a police uniform standing in the entrance, a badge clipped to her belt. Detective Sarah Morrison, Judge Claire Morrison's daughter and the lead investigator for the County Special Crimes Unit. Maria Rodriguez is a mandatory reporter, Detective Morrison continued, walking into the waiting room. When she witnessed and recorded you making statements that suggested the commission of serious crimes, including fraud, falsification of records, and child abandonment, she was legally obligated to report it. And she did. To me. 2 days ago. Richard's face went pale. This is absurd. I'm one of the most respected surgeons in. You're under investigation for multiple felonies, Detective Morrison said calmly. We've obtained warrants for your medical records, your phone records, and your financial records from 8 years ago. We've interviewed the nurse who helped you smuggle the baby out of Boston General. She's willing to testify in exchange for immunity. And we have recorded evidence of you admitting that you concealed the child's existence and threatened Mr. Patrick when he questioned the circumstances of the adoption. She pulled out a pair of handcuffs. Dr. Richard Montgomery, you're under arrest for fraud, falsification of public records, child endangerment, and conspiracy to commit kidnapping. The waiting room fell silent. Richard stared at the detective, at the handcuffs, at his daughter's unflinching gaze. Elegance. You can't let them do this. I'm your father. You stopped being my father the moment you stole my daughter, Elegance said quietly. Take him away, detective. As Detective Morrison read Richard his rights and led him out of the hospital in handcuffs, Edwin pulled Elegance into his arms. She collapsed against his chest, 8 years of grief and anger and loss finally breaking free in great, shuddering sobs. It's over, Edwin murmured into her hair. It's finally over. And for the first time since she'd walked into that ER and seen her lost love holding their stolen daughter, Elegance allowed herself to believe it. Emotional climax. Nancy wakes up. 3 days later, Nancy opened her eyes. Edwin was dozing in the chair beside her bed, his hand wrapped around hers, when he felt her finger squeeze. "Daddy." His eyes flew open. "Nancy. Oh, thank God. How do you feel, sweetheart?" "Tired. And my head hurts." "I know, baby girl. But you're going to be okay. Dr. Elegance fixed you right up." Nancy turned her head slowly, wincing at the movement, and found Elegance standing on the other side of the bed. "Hi, Mama." The word hit Elegance like a physical blow. "Hi, sweetheart. Are you really my mom?" "Yes, I really am." "And you're not going away again?" Elegance sat on the edge of the bed, taking Nancy's other hand. "Never. I promise you, Nancy. I'm never going away again." Nancy smiled, a small, sleepy smile. "Good, because I always wanted a mom." "And I always wanted a daughter," Elegance said, tears streaming down her face. "I always wanted you." Nancy's eyes drifted closed again, but this time, her sleep was peaceful, untroubled by fever or fear. Edwin reached across the bed, taking Elegance's hand. "We are a family now. A real family." "A real family," Elegance echoed. And as morning light filtered through the hospital windows, falling across their sleeping daughter, both of them finally allowed themselves to hope. The house Edwin had bought with his savings was small, a 3-bedroom ranch on the edge of town with a big backyard and an ancient oak tree perfect for climbing, but it was theirs. Edwin stood in the kitchen, attempting to flip pancakes while Nancy sat at the table, coloring in a medical textbook Elegance had bought her. The little girl had decided she wanted to be a doctor like her mom, though she was also considering becoming a race car driver like her dad. Compromise, Edwin had suggested. You can be a doctor who races cars on weekends. Nancy had thought this was an excellent plan. The front door opened, and Elegance walked in, arms full of grocery bags. Edwin hurried over to help, stealing a kiss as he took the bags. "How was the hearing?" he asked quietly. Elegance had spent the morning at the medical board's final hearing regarding her license. After 6 months of investigation, testimony, and legal wrangling, they'd finally reached a decision. "Full reinstatement," Elegance said, unable to keep the smile from her face.
"No probation, no restrictions."
They said my actions were justified given the circumstances and that I acted in the best interests of my patient, who happened to be my daughter. Edwin pulled her into a tight hug. "That's amazing, Ellie. I'm so proud of you." "What about your father?" He still couldn't bring himself to call Richard Montgomery anything else. Elegance's expression darkened. He pled guilty to all charges. The judge sentenced him to 3 years in prison, followed by 10 years probation. He'll never practice medicine again. Part of her, the part that was still a daughter, grieved for that. But the larger part, the part that was a mother, felt only grim satisfaction. Her father had stolen 8 years from her. Now he would lose 3 of his own. "How do you feel?" Edwin asked. Relieved, sad, angry, grateful, all at once. "That's fair." Nancy looked up from her coloring. "Is Grandpa Richard going to come back?" They'd explained, as gently as possible, what had happened. Nancy knew that her grandfather had made very bad choices, that he'd hurt people, and that he had to face consequences for those choices. "He'll come back eventually," Elegance said, sitting down beside Nancy. "But he won't be living with us, and he'll only be able to visit if we say it's okay." Nancy considered this. "I don't think I want him to visit. He's mean." "That's okay, sweetheart. You get to decide." Nancy nodded, satisfied, and returned to her coloring. Edwin flipped the pancakes onto plates, slightly burned, but edible, and brought them to the table. As they sat down together, Nancy between them, Elegance looked around the small kitchen with its mismatched chairs and second-hand table, and she thought about the life she'd imagined for herself at 19. It hadn't looked like this. It had looked like Boston penthouses and prestigious hospitals and a career that would make her father proud. But this messy, imperfect, miraculous family, was so much better than anything she could have planned. "Daddy, you burned the pancakes again," Nancy announced. "I did not burn them. I caramelized them." "That's not what caramelized means." Edwin looked at Elegance. "Your daughter is too smart for her own good." "Our daughter," Elegance corrected. "And yes, she is." Nancy giggled, drowning her pancakes in syrup. "Can we go to the park after breakfast? I want to show Mama the treehouse you built." "Absolutely," Edwin said, "right after we clean up these perfectly caramelized pancakes." As Nancy chatted about the treehouse, which apparently had a secret compartment and a rope ladder and was the coolest treehouse in the entire world, Elegance felt Edwin's hand find hers under the table. They'd lost 8 years, but they had a lifetime ahead of them to make up for it. And they had Nancy, their miracle, their stolen child, found again, their family. Epilogue. 2 years later, Dr. Elegance Patrick, she'd finally, officially, taken Edwin's last name, stood in the emergency room of County General, reviewing a chart, when the doors burst open. A man rushed in, a little boy in his arms, panic written all over his face. "Please, he's burning up. I don't know what to do." Elegance set down her chart and moved forward, her professional mask sliding into place. "Let's take a look. What's his name?" "Oliver. He's 5. The fever started this morning, and it just keeps getting worse." Elegance guided them to an exam room, already mentally running through differential diagnoses. But as she looked up at the father, really looked at him, something in her chest tightened. She recognized that panic, that fear, that desperate love. She'd seen it in Edwin's eyes 8 years ago when he'd brought Nancy to this same hospital. "We are going to take good care of Oliver," she said gently. "I promise." And as she began the examination, checking vitals and ordering tests, Elegance made a silent vow to herself. She would fight for every patient who came through those doors. She would fight for every parent who brought their sick child in, terrified and desperate, because she knew exactly how it felt to almost lose everything. And she knew exactly how precious the miracle of getting it back could be. Behind the nurse's station, Maria watched Elegance work, a satisfied smile on her face. She'd been at County General for 23 years now, and she'd seen a lot of doctors come and go. But Dr. Elegance Patrick was different. She'd been broken, and she'd put herself back together. She'd lost everything, and she'd fought to reclaim it. And now she was using that experience to heal others, to fight for families the way she'd had to fight for her own. Maria pulled out her phone and sent a quick text to Edwin. "Your wife is amazing. You're a lucky man." The response came almost immediately. "Trust me, I know." Across town, in the garage he now owned, Edwin Patrick wiped grease from his hands and checked his watch. Almost time to pick Nancy up from school. She'd started 4th grade this year and was already at the top of her class in science. Last week, she'd announced that she'd decided on her future career, pediatric surgeon. Like her mom, but specifically helping kids. Edwin had never been prouder. His phone buzzed with Maria's text, and he smiled. Yeah, he was lucky. Lucky beyond measure. He'd found a baby on a church doorstep 8 years ago, and he'd found his soulmate in an emergency room 2 years later. He'd lost years with Elegance, but they'd found their way back to each other. And now they had forever. As Edwin climbed into his truck, the same old pickup he'd been driving for 15 years, because some things were worth keeping, he thought about that February morning when he'd found Nancy. He'd thought he was saving her, but really, she'd save him. And then, when he needed it most, she'd brought him back to Elegance. Their stolen child had given them back everything they'd lost. She'd given them family. She'd given them hope. She'd given them love. And in the end, that was the only thing that mattered. I want to say thank you for taking your precious time watching. Please, before you leave, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe.